I think that will do me better. All right, welcome to Ruth Bardon's book launch. And she is in Durham, North Carolina, but she grew up in Highland Park, New Jersey. And how I heard about her is that her latest book is published by Main Street Rag. So we are sister poets with Main Street Rag. We already have a message. Just to let y'all know, a couple of like little housekeeping things. The chat section is a great way for us to keep in touch, and that's also a wonderful way that if you have questions for Ruth, if you ask them there, I will pay attention to them. Of course, at the end, you'll also have a chance to ask any questions directly to her. Also, I've noticed a lot of times if there's a phrase in a poem that really strikes you, people will put it in the chat. I do try to send that chat section to the poet who today will be Ruth, so that she can see comments in real time and in response to different poems. It is hard to do a reading book launch like this because we're going to mute, so she won't hear us clapping, but you'll see our happy faces, Ruth, and I hope that that is encouragement enough. If people can mute this, I see y'all are already doing that. Y'all are awesome, and that will make things much easier. If you'd like to read for open mic, just send me a message, and you can put it in the chat section. I'll keep tabs on that. If you do not want to be videotaped, just read at the very end. I will let everybody know that I'm taking the, that I'm stopping the recording. And that way, if that's your preference, some people, if you have a poem that you haven't published yet, if it gets read and put on YouTube, it might be considered published. So be careful what you read, and just to protect y'all from that. So with that, there is no more information I have. I'm gonna hand you over to the capable hands of Ruth. Thank you, Ruth, for being here.
Well, thank you. And I had to laugh when you said my latest book was with Main Street Rag, because my only book is with Main Street Rag. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm very grateful, and thank you everyone for joining me tonight. So Malika invited me to do this, and as she said, she's offering book launches each month to people who have books coming out that month, and my first and only book is coming out this month. It's a chapbook called Demon Barber, and it's available from Main Street Rag. My poetry tends to be fairly short and very personal. So although I always feel fine about sharing my poetry with strangers, I'm much less comfortable sharing it with people who actually know me. So I was initially a little reluctant to do this book launch, but now that I'm here, I'm happy to be here and happy to have this opportunity. And I really admire the way that Malika has been running these readings. I've watched quite a few, and she does a great job of keeping it really well organized and keeping track of all the moving parts. So I'm in good hands. So I'd like to start out by saying that the title poem of the book, which is Demon Barber, was inspired by two memories of seeing the play Sweeney Todd, and he's known as the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. So the first memory is of seeing the show at a time when I was young and kind of innocent, and the second is of seeing it at a time when I was more aware of the possibilities of random, unexpected tragedy. The demon barber who's about to get you when you least expect it. So a lot of these poems have to do with the death of my first husband 26 years ago, and my feeling of the precariousness of everything we hold dear. So I think the poems are timely. So I want to start out with 4 of the very sad and serious poems, and then lighten up a little as I go on, although it never gets all that light, I'm sorry to say. So my plan is to read 9 books from the chapbook and 3 new poems, and I've timed it, and I think it's 15 minutes. Okay, so here goes. The first poem is called Cantaloupe. In the hospital that morning, there had only been 2 smells, sour and cloying, the cloying fighting with the sour and mostly winning. So when you entered the house that afternoon, it was almost too much. The shafts of light, like planks, balanced on the windowsill above the sink and plunging down, and the jumble of dishes leaning against each other in the dish drain. the damp towel hugging the side of the refrigerator, the precarious pile of cards, but mostly the cantaloupe, sitting humbly on the counter and infusing the room with everything you'd miss. These are kind of chronological. So the second poem is called How We Grieved. We divvied up the roles we'd play, and she got the howling and screaming and storming around the rooms, and I got the quiet, stoic, grim face with crying in the shower and the car, and we stuck to those all that time through good and bad. The windows were black squares, and the floor sometimes squeaked and complained, and the lawn went from flowers to leaves to flowers. She had the best lines. She got to yell in the middle of the night, something I've never done and will never do. I'm too used to this way, too accustomed to sitting on the sofa, looking at the mantelpiece, its collection of curios grouped in 3s and 2s and 1s. I could move them around, introduce them into new arrangements, but what's the use? I should have done more yelling when I could, when I still had a chance. But it's stupid and sad to do it now. She's been gone for years, but I still hear her wailing around the corners of the house. And then I come close and press into the cold windows, moving past my reflection to the deep place where we're frozen together. She with her face lined with shock, and me balancing on the balls of my feet like a tight drum, the same thing beating at us both. This next one is what it feels like after a great change. This poem is called Strange. Strange is the hookup. Strange is the particle. Strange is the hometown. Strange is the new wound. Strange is learning to walk in those shoes, learning to talk as if you were someone else, pretending to love someone. The water is syrupy. The cake bends in your mouth. The plate feels odd in your hands. Strange is the utensil you're given and expected to use. Strange is the pattern on the road signs. Strange is the new life you may be given, the instruction manual, the horizon of words running west to east, the syllables that bounce at odd angles. And then the last poem in this group is about how glad you feel when you're past a crisis and how there's a kind of a selfishness in it. And it's a Halloween poem. It's called Where There's Smoke. Where there's smoke, there's a hint. There's a tickle in your throat. Things come in and out of focus. You walk down the driveway and something is wrong. A memory is stirring, a bitter taste, a singed pack of cards, a strange hard candy in a bowl. You've stepped out into the same November world, the candy wrapper, the jewel from the tiara, the scratch on the car door. That must be smoke, you think, but not here. The fire is always elsewhere. And what is the smoke? What is the scarf of it brushing your face? It's the thump and the thrill of being here, not there. Okay, now I'm going to switch gears quite a lot and read a couple of technology poems. I've been writing a fair amount about modern technology. So this first poem is called Alexa. She is ignorant and admits to being easily confused. She tells her jokes with a cheerfulness that shows how lost she is. I want to help her and teach her how the world works. And I love this feeling of knowing so much more. But it also makes me hate her a little more each time. Each time she admits she's having trouble, is helpless to assist. Like a mother of grown children who see her now as someone who offers only facts from the news, a weather report, or a small repertoire of songs and stories. Like the mother I may become, sitting and nodding as if I understood the talk, chiming in and coming to attention when my name is spoken. And I'm hoping I'm not breaking up. I've gotten a little message that says your internet connection is unstable. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so the second technology poem is called Uber. The silent dot on the screen moves and stops and starts again, an ant sniffing out my scent, determined to find me, ambassador of an omniscient eye that never looks away, no sparrow overlooked. And I am a sparrow, perched on the sidewalk, outside the hotel lobby. And if the unforeseen, the sudden and bewildering blocks its progress, a clod of dirt, a predator, I'll be forewarned. Uber, illuminate my life. Show me what will happen. Show me the caravan approaching, the good, bad, impossible. You who survey the world, seeing exactly where I stand, knowing how to reach me. Let me decide to see the future in my hand, or to avert my eyes and see only my reflection in the dark glass window that rises behind me. Okay, the last three poems from the chapbook that I'll read are kind of a grab bag. So the first one is about what it's like to have your children grow up. It's called How It Starts. It starts when you enter a room and your children are talking about you, calling you she, not mom. For once, you hear them speaking in their native tongue. All this time they've been translating. They hum melodies you've never heard and mouth the lyrics, and their hands form complicated patterns in the air. It ends with them whispering in a hallway, slowly circling and then landing. They come in and touch your arm as if you are a bubble or a baby or a flower. Then they fly, their small shadows flitting from wall to wall to wall. And the next poem I want to read is a love poem because I did find love again. It's called Love. When you told me your story, I could barely hear it. Time passed and it grew inside me. It lost its borders and spread like water. It ate sunlight, it ate earth, it became something solid. It wove in and out of other stories. They were singing, they were spinning. Electrons describing a circle that surrounds us, that curves into me like a hook in a cold fish. And then the last one I'm going to read from the chapbook is called My Favorites. My favorites are the ones I never use. The souvenir mug left on the shelf, and the turquoise nightgown with a pattern of birds. Some other me is wearing those pearls and sleeping under the antique quilt. What I do instead is to wait for the morning when I'll sit up in bed and everything I see, the framed pictures, the window, the tilted mirror looking back, is all there is, as if my future self were not glaring at me, furious at all I squandered. Okay.
Everybody can unmute. I wanted to say there was a period of time where a couple people could not hear. And so if they could let us know which poem it was in the middle of, because I'd like to go back to that, because I think it was 4 poems ago. And I just want to make sure that we don't have them miss out on it. So if you don't mind going back to 4 poems ago, and I'm trying to see, it was Toby couldn't hear and Christine couldn't hear. Is that correct, Christine and Toby?
Yeah, I stopped being able to hear in the middle of Uber, and
Okay.
I can't remember which one she was reading when it came back on.
Okay, because it was then Alexa, then Uber, and then the one after that. Because I hate to have you miss it, and I know it was and you don't want to miss it. So if you don't mind
No.
doing that, that would be awesome.
I'm happy to do that. So I should read Uber and How It Starts, and so was it just those two?
I think those two. Is that correct? So it was three people. It was Toby, Ellie, and who else couldn't hear? Christine.
Okay, so I'll read. I'll start with Uber, right?
Yep. Everybody's saying yes. Just those two. That's perfect. Thank you, guys.
Okay. So sorry, I've got paper here because I like paper. Okay, so Uber. The silent dot on the screen moves and starts. I'm sorry. The silent dot on the screen moves and stops and starts again. An ant sniffing out my scent, determined to find me, ambassador of an omniscient eye that never looks away. No sparrow overlooked. And I am a sparrow, perched on the sidewalk outside the hotel lobby. And if the unforeseen, the sudden and bewildering, blocks its progress, a clod of dirt, a predator, I'll be forewarned. Uber, illuminate my life. Show me what will happen. Show me the caravan approaching, the good, bad, impossible. You who survey the world, seeing exactly where I stand, knowing how to reach me. Let me decide to see the future in my hand, or to avert my eyes and see only my reflection in the dark glass window that rises behind me. And I think the next one was How It Starts. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. How It Starts. And what I said was that this is about having adult children. It starts when you enter a room and your children are talking about you, calling you she, not mom. For once, you hear them speaking in their native tongue. All this time, they've been translating. They hum melodies you've never heard and mouth the lyrics, and their hands form complicated patterns in the air. It ends with them whispering in a hallway, slowly circling and then landing. They come in and touch your arm as if you are a bubble or a baby or a flower. Then they fly, their small shadows flitting from wall to wall to wall.
Thank you.
So
Thank
I
you.
think
I'm glad
now,
you read those again. Thank you. I
Thank
think
you.
that
So,
was really important.
and I have three more that are not in the chapbook. Should I go ahead?
Perfect. Yes.
All right. So these are new-ish. And the first one was just published this month. And it's about aging. Lots of things about aging. It's called Breathe In. My uncle's joke. The man whose headphones tell him, breathe in, breathe out, and when his girlfriend insists that he take them off, he dies. I thought it was funny. My sister was horrified. Young, we couldn't imagine that our bodies might change. Today, it's a song in the background that I find myself moving to. It's knowing there's something over my shoulder slipping away when I turn to look. It's an image that won't come clear. It's a notebook on the table, waiting to be filled, waiting to be color-coded, one message after the other. It's my name appearing on my clothing. It's quiet now. Breathe in, breathe out. The timer chirps, and the car flashes orange warnings, then red, and I walk without thinking when the light turns green. I rise from the table like a marionette. The next one is a high school memory. have a high school friend here today. I don't know if she has the same memory that I do, so this might be interesting. It's called Hitchcock. Our high school English teacher told us about the oddness, the obsessions of Alfred Hitchcock, about the fact that his mother instructed him to leave a room looking as if no one had been there. And we all looked up from our desks, wide-eyed, because our mothers had told us the very same thing. I remember this so often, leaving my house immaculate, because I can't help feeling that the only alternative is to join that other storyline, the one that leads inevitably to the moment when the crowd stares at you and then gathers to attack. If no traces were left, you couldn't be found. No one would know how you sat at the table, dripping crumbs, chewing. But by wiping a counter, you become that cool blonde or that man who walks through a train and exits before anyone knows that he was there. And the last one I was going to read is a sort of a pandemic poem. I think all of the poets in the group tonight are writing pandemic poems. You kind of can't help it. So this one is called Witness. I ran into Nick on the library steps after class years ago, and when he asked where I'd been, I explained about the miscarriage. What I remember is the look he gave me when I said that nothing that bad had ever happened to me. He looked at me, but I knew he was seeing something else, someone else, and I was ashamed. Today, taking a walk, I thought of him, almost wanting him to know how things turned out. But I know it's better to leave him a witness to something that pure, to someone who lived for a while, not knowing that the first death is always the first of many, a beginning, not an end. And that's what I've got.
People can unmute, you can clap.
Wow.
Wow, thank you so very much.
Oh,
Fantastic.
that was fabulous.
Awesome.
Wow.
This went to gallery view, so now I can see faces, which is nice.
Yeah, I thought you'd be happy about that. So I'm pulling it off of the spotlight video so that you can see everybody, Ruth. And we'll start going to questions and answers in a moment. And there is a lot in the chat, so we'll go through that. I wanted to know who your high school buddy was.
Oh, Ellie. Ellie, can you raise your hand?
That's me, and I remember that.
You remember that?
That's awesome. That's what I wanted to know. That's fantastic. Thank you, Ellie.
Wonderful.
And we had a few
Yeah.
more people join us, so that's fantastic as well. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Just speak up, or if you'd rather me ask them, I'll be threading through the chat section. But I did like the comments that were rolling in, and I thought I'd read them to you, Ruth, so you can kind of see. That's so awesome. Karen, you were saying I'm already working this chat section. Christina said, I can't wait to hear you read, Ruth. Let's see. Oh, and Karen, thank you for letting me know somebody was waiting in the waiting room. Sometimes it doesn't give me an alert. So the first comments we start having right off the bat, Ruth, is the name of the book. And I'm glad you gave the history back behind that. Karen would say she really was interested in that. Christy loved the line, everything you'd miss. And then, yep, the cantaloupe and the smell, so visceral and haunting is what Karen said. I really like the strange, the repetition of strange and how accurate and powerful, and also oddly disorienting everything is after loss. The fire is always elsewhere. Karen really loved that line. Christine said, I love the viewpoint of the mother in Alexa. And then Karen just said, I love the personification of Alexa. And that's when we were having a little bit of problems with hearing. I think it was the bandwidth maybe. But I'm glad we went back so that people could hear that. And let's see. Oh, interesting. So somebody said, you write so visually. And that was from Candy and Diane. And I also noticed, though, that you have a good sense of smell and texture. And I wasn't sure, do you consciously think in terms of texture or other senses? Because there was smell and taste and texture in a way that I found wonderfully unusual.
No, that's not something I'm aware of, but thank you. I'll be thinking about it now.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I wondered if you were a tactile artist or if there was something, or do you knit or something like that is what it made me think of. Karen said,
nothing domestic, sorry.
I'm laughing at the idea of you knitting, Ruth.
Me too.
Then Karen also said she's loving the last lines of every one of the poems and calling you she, not mom, the adult children poems that speaking in their native tongue. She said, this is such a delicious parent poem. Oh, and so Toby had to leave. So she was sorry. Toby wrote, lovely, thanks for allowing me to drop in. I love the range. I've got to go to another Zoom. Thanks, Ruth. Okay, so Christy wants to know, what is your process for writing these poems, Ruth?
I thought I might be asked this. My process is lousy and inefficient. I wish I had a better process. I guess I just kind of mentally open a door. I decide it's time to start to write something. I know I'm going to have the time, and I just kind of wait for something to show up. That's the best way I can put it. And usually it shows up at a time when I cannot write something down. It shows up when I'm driving or I'm in the shower or I'm talking to someone, and then I have to kind of quickly grab a piece of paper if I can and write something down, and hopefully I'll kind of remember what it was all about, and then, put it on the computer and then come back to it, and then revise and revise and revise and try different things and see what works. So I wish I had a more organized way of doing this, but this is the best way I can explain what it is. Just kind of say, all right, I'm ready now, please come, and then hope something drops in.
And I think that it's valid that that's your process. I mean, some people are very different in how they approach it. And it's always, I think as poets, we like to hear other people's approaches because sometimes they line up or sometimes they're very different, and it gives us ideas. So thank you for that, Ruth. Okay, so Karen's asking, how did you put the chapbook together? How did you know when you were ready to start into ordering them?
So how did I know when I was going to start ordering them in the chapbook?
Yes.
Is that the question?
What was the process of putting the chapbook together?
Oh, well, clearly anything I had published, I was going to put in there, which wasn't a whole lot. I guess I was thinking of starting with these poems about grieving, and there's quite a few of them, and then moving past that. I feel like there's a sequence, and it has to do with. I'd have to look at it again and try to remember how I decided how to put things in. They just seem to kind of fall into blocks. The technology ones, which there are quite a few of, tended to fall into a block, and aging ones seem to fall into a block. It was there's kind of a journey, I think. So I guess it was a kind of a chronological journey.
Yeah, that's perfect. And chronological oftentimes makes it a lot easier to kind of approach how to do this. This is a really great question. Let me go back to Christine said, how long did it take you to process the grief? Did you write poems during the experience of losing John? If not, when could you start to write about the experience?
I wasn't writing at all during that time in my life. I took around a 20-year hiatus from writing. I think I started writing again when my life got a little bit less busy. There was a time when I was very, very busy. So I think it was just a question of having some breathing space, and that turned out to be around maybe 8 or 9 years after he died. And then after that, I found that I had even more time because I had a job, and then I no longer had the job, so I had much more time then. So I did not write about it at the time, no, because and if I'd been writing, maybe I would have, but I wasn't writing during that time. So, and I wouldn't have had the time to anyhow. So I think there was a long period of my life where I was very happy and very busy, and then I was very sad, and then I was very busy, and then I was less busy and sad during part of that time and happy during part of that time. But I think it had to do more with how much free time I had.
Makes sense. Lucille Clifton said, ironically, when my children got older, my poems got longer. You know, that oftentimes we have just such momentary breaks to write something down. It's a very good point. So Jojo said he was sorry. He did have to leave and jump off, but he said his friend requested you on Facebook and really enjoyed your poems. And Karen has...
As my friends know, I'm not on Facebook. I just decided to become your friend, Malika, so I could do this, but I...
No, I was going to say, I kind of already knew that, because when I tracked you down, I said, well, this will make it easy for us to plan that. Karen has a question about how did you land on Main Street Rag as your publisher?
They were willing to publish me.
Right?
There you go. Good answer.
It's a good question, Karen, and I think it's one that a lot of people who are heading in the direction of having a book published or wanting to have a book published ask, how did you find a publisher? So
You
that's
submit
awesome.
manuscripts to lots and lots of contests.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this doesn't oftentimes happen, but I have somebody who has written me and said there is a poem they'd like to request. Apple, is there any chance you read it?
Okay, so I get one more.
Yes, you do. And the person who asked for it, I don't know if you wanted to be mentioned, but that's wonderful.
That's okay.
Okay, Kelly said it's okay. So Kelly's the one. You're actually, you know, it's like being at a concert and somebody is screaming out, "I played this one."
Kelly knows this poem, and not many people do. So okay.
I love it.
So this poem is called Apple. I told it as a funny story, how every day my father went to work with an apple in his lunch, and how he brought it home every evening, and how my mother put it in his lunch the next day, one apple traveling back and forth 5 times each week, every Friday, the carrying apple being discarded, every Monday, a new one taking its place. Now I think of its redness, its roundness, and what was packed into it. Now I think of the choice every day to bring it back. Years after he died, she had his ashes moved to the Jewish cemetery, breaking all sorts of rules because she'd returned to her religion. He'd have hated this, but I imagine that he'd have stayed silent, carrying his love and resignation back and forth between worlds, unable to deny her this hope and unwilling, after all, to spare her from it.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Wow. Love that.
Love that.
That's beautiful.
Kelly, we can understand why that was a request. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ruth.
Wow. Wow.
That was beautiful.
So I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss any questions in the chat section. So if you have one, now would be a good time to ask it. And if I missed it, please forgive me. Go ahead and send it to me again. Okay, there is a question. Nancy, you want to ask it? You can just unmute and do so if you want to. Let me see if I can help you. Ask to unmute. Or you can write it here. Okay. How is your poetry writing different now than from grad school? Good question.
Oh, Well, I think it's a lot better. I was just so young when I was getting my MFA. I was much too young to get an MFA, I think. So how is it different? Well, I think I'm more thoughtful. I think I'm less concerned with. I'm an older, wiser person. So I don't know if the writing is different, but I think I'm different. So, I guess I wrote more because more people were seeing it, because people were seeing it on a regular basis. But I don't know if that makes a difference in terms of quality or not. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer to any of these questions.
I think it's just good to have whatever question answered in the way that's most true for you. That's, I think, helpful. And I do think that it's fair to say that who we are influences how we write. And that as we grow older and mature and have life experiences, certainly those things touch us and touch our work. So it's very valid. So now actually Nancy said, good answer. Candy and Diane said, how did you start writing and why did you choose poetry?
It's funny because of this pandemic, I think I've been doing what everybody in the world has been doing, which is like going through old boxes of things. And I've been like going through all this stuff I kept from childhood. And I was really kind of shocked that, in my first grade little autograph book, my grandmother wrote about my writing poetry, and that's like a continuous thing starting from when I learned to write. So I guess I started when I learned to write. I knew I always wrote poetry, but it was really kind of shocking to see that being mentioned by so many people starting when I was around, 7. So I'm sorry. So the first part of the question was, when did I start and why poetry? I've tried to write stories and I'm really bad at it. I think at one point I thought it'd be fun to be a writer, like a novelist or a short story writer, but my mind doesn't work that way. And I know there are people who do both, and I admire them, but I'm just not one of them. So I wrote poetry because that's the thing I can write or try to. So
That's awesome.
No, you can write, Ruth. It's not you try to. You do an amazing, amazing job. So thank you.
That's awesome. And then Karen also asked, are there any journals that pop into your head as ones you really enjoy reading that you come back to time and time again?
Well, this whole thing is really embarrassing because I don't read a lot of poetry. My friend Kelly will know that. I don't read journals on a regular basis. If a journal shows up at my house, which happens because if you submit to something or get something published, then the journals show up at your house.
Right.
And I read whatever is in that journal. It's like if you put the dish in front of me, I'll drink out of it. I won't go and seek out food on my own. So I recently had something in New Ohio Review, and I thought the first poem in that journal was fantastic. So I was very impressed by that. But normally I read my friends' poetry, and I read poems if I happen upon them, but I don't tend to read journals. And I wish I did because I think I'd be a better writer if I read more. So I ought to.
You're cracking me up with the ought to or not. I think that like other people are putting here is good answer. These are what's true for you. So I kind of appreciate the dialogue and the different aspects of things. And I think we all have those shoulds in our mind as people. And I had a friend that used to say, look, I won't shit on you if you won't shit on me. And maybe we shouldn't should ourselves.
I think I've always liked reading poetry most if I know the person who's written it. That's always been a pleasure, like being in a workshop or I really do enjoy reading the poetry of the people I know. So.
That's a really good answer.
Are you relating to that, Karen? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And two, the fewer journals you read, the more time you have to write your own stuff, right?
That's right. It's a plan.
Yeah, it's evil genius, right?
That's me, the evil genius. Yeah.
Okay, when I called my dad an evil genius, he said, "You have half of that right."
I can ask which half.
I didn't even bother because I didn't want to know. I'm gonna. Okay, so I'm gonna say that I think we're heading towards open mic, and I just have one person so far. So if somebody else would like to join us, that would be great. And can we take a moment to thank Ruth again for joining us and putting up with
Yay! Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a request. Would my friend Kelly be interested in reading anything of hers?
Oh my goodness.
I love it. And Kelly's got a great background.
Ooh, Ruth, you're in so much trouble.
You know which one I like that one. The one that was about the watch in the jail cell.
Oh, I could read that one. It's kind of horrible, but
No, it's wonderful.
okay.
You can read whatever you want.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm honored to be asked. Yeah, sure. But you said you had somebody, Malika, on the list. Would that person like to go first?
Well,
or-
Kelly, I know that she would like to go very last, and I also don't worry about if you would like me to record, I will. But if y'all are good, we can go ahead and stop the recording portion of things. Does that feel
would be
right to everybody?
fine.
Okay, that was the sense
That
I
would
was getting, and so we will
Okay.
go